When you see this classic rag doll, with her red yarn hair and iconic face, you might not recognize her by her true name. Most people will look at this image and recognize her from this infamous one. This second image and the story that goes along with it have made thousands of people recognize the historical beloved doll, not as Raggedy Ann, but as Annabelle.
You think this is how they defeat her in the movie with the spirit box?
I don't think that's how they defeat her.
The Annabelle doll has become synonymous with terror, capturing the imaginations of horror enthusiasts worldwide through its portrayal in movies, books, and folklore. However, behind the chilling stories lies a less recognized but much more poignant narrative: the profound impact on the legacy and reputation of the beloved Raggedy Ann and Andy dolls, created as symbols of innocence and childhood joy. These cherished characters have been overshadowed and redefined by the macabre associations of the Annabelle case. In this video essay, I will delve into how a singular sensational story has transformed public perception, overshadowing the doll's historical significance and the original intent of their creator. Join me on this journey as we explore the cultural ramifications and the lasting consequences of the Annabelle phenomenon on Raggedy Ann and Andy's enduring legacy. Raggedy Ann and Andy, iconic figures of American children's literature and toys, were created by author and illustrator Johnny Barton Gruelle in the early 1900s. Their story begins in the charming backdrop of rural Indiana, where Gruelle's creative vision and family ties brought these characters to life. The exact origins of the Raggedy Ann doll and its related stories are shrouded in mystery and myth. According to Patricia Hall, a biographer of Johnny Gruelle, the widely circulated tale involves Gruelle's young daughter, Marcella Delight Gruelle, discovering a faceless rag doll in her grandmother's attic. Gruelle allegedly drew a face on the doll and suggested sewing a shoe button for a missing eye. However, the details of this story vary widely, with dates ranging from as early as 1900 to as late as 1914, and locations spanning suburban Indianapolis, Indiana, downtown Cleveland, Ohio, and Wilton, Connecticut. A more plausible account, as shared by Gruelle's wife, Myrtle J. Gruelle, indicates that her husband had found an old homemade rag doll in the attic of his parents' Indianapolis home around the turn of the 20th century and years before their daughter was born. Myrtle recalled, "There was something he wanted from the attic. While he was rummaging around for it, he found an old rag doll his mother had made for his sister. He said then that the doll would make a good story." She further explained that Johnny kept the doll in mind until they had Marcella. Observing her play with dolls inspired him to write the stories, drawing ideas from watching her. As I tell this story, the girl who inspired it all is very important. Marcella Delight Gruelle, born on August 18, 1902, was the beloved firstborn daughter of the young Myrtle and Johnny Gruelle in Indianapolis, Indiana, born only several days past her mother's 18th birthday. Marcella was an imaginative girl, always playing with dolls and other toys and creating stories and names for every individual toy. Johnny drew inspiration from her vibrant spirit, weaving it into his children's tales. In 1910, the Gruelle family moved to New Canaan, Connecticut, where they settled into Tweedledee Lodge. A year later, Johnny Gruelle began creating his iconic Mr. Tweedledee comic strips, using his daughter as inspiration for the characters Sticky and Dolly. The aforementioned attic doll was fixed up and offered to a young Marcella by Johnny, and quickly became one of her favorite playthings. She carried it everywhere. Johnny Gruelle was so inspired by the way his daughter would play, often describing it as magical, that he decided other children would love the doll as well. He began working on patents for a story about this beloved doll. The name Raggedy Ann derived from a clever mix of the story Orphan Annie and the poems about Raggedy Man. In her book, Johnny Gruelle, creator of Raggedy Ann and Andy, Patricia Hall describes the events of 1915 when Marcella Gruelle came home from school needing a vaccination. Despite concerns about vaccination risks, as it was still a medical practice with little testing and safety as is provided today, Myrtle reluctantly gave permission. After Marcella's first vaccination didn't seem effective, the school nurse administered a second one without parental consent. As was later found out, the same needle was being used to administer this vaccination to multiple students. Days later, Marcella began suffering from leg pains and worsening health. Despite extensive medical efforts, Marcella Delight Gruelle passed away on November 8, 1915, at just 13 years old. While the official cause of death was listed as valvular heart disease and edema, Johnny and Myrtle believed a bad vaccination was responsible. Patricia Hall also notes an alternative theory that suggested Marcella may have suffered from Guillain-Barré syndrome, a condition known to cause severe complications and is potentially linked to vaccines, though that is not confirmed. This tragic event deeply affected the Gruelle family and played a significant role in the creation of Raggedy Ann, as Johnny spent his final moments with Marcella telling her stories that included her dolls and toys, providing comfort during her illness. There is no way to tell the story of the creation of Raggedy Ann and Andy without going into the tragedy that influenced Gruelle to publish it, forever memorializing his daughter within the Raggedy Ann and Andy books, where she is inserted as the owner of Ann, Andy, and other reoccurring toys and the stories that spring to life when she isn't around. The fact that a doll created with this purpose has been turned into a widely recognized symbol of horror is heartbreaking, to say the least. The next time you see a claim stating that Raggedy Ann or Andy are inherently evil or demonic because of Annabelle, of whom unfortunately I will have to talk about in a bit, I want you to remember this story of a young couple losing their daughter to a tragedy of medical malpractice and think to yourself, is this appropriate? Is this not incredibly offensive to the suffering that the Gruelle family faced? Does this not shadow the calamitous happenings of a young girl's death in fairy tales and mass-marketed lies? Sit with that. Just imagine if this had happened to you or someone you love. A student nurse, named either Donna or Deirdre depending on the source, was given a Raggedy Ann doll in 1970 as a gift from her mother on her 28th birthday. Thrilled with the gift, she brought it back to her apartment, which she shared with another young nurse named Angie. Over time, the women claimed that the doll behaved strangely. It moved things around their home, slammed doors, attacked Donna, Deirdre's boyfriend, and left notes that said "help me" around their home. The women later hired a spiritual medium that held a seance and told the two women that the doll was inhabited by the spirit of a deceased 7-year-old named Annabelle Higgins, whose body had been found years earlier on the site where their apartment building had been built. The medium claimed that the spirit was benevolent and simply wanted to be loved and cared for. The two young nurses reportedly felt bad for the spirit and consented to allow her to take up permanent residence in the doll. Eventually, in an attempt to rid their home of the Annabelle doll spirit, Donna, Deirdre, and Angie called on an Episcopal priest known as Father Hagen. Hagen contacted his superior, Father Cook, who alerted Ed and Lorraine Warren. Edward, Ed, and Lorraine Warren, a married couple from Connecticut, worked as paranormal investigators starting in the early 1950s. Lorraine and her son-in-law, Tony Spera, ran the now-closed Warren's Occult Museum. The museum displayed many claimed haunted objects and artifacts from around the world. Many of the artifacts from their most famous investigations were featured. As of 2020, the museum is owned by Ed and Lorraine's daughter, Judy Warren, and her husband, Tony Spera, and it closed to the public following Lorraine's death in 2019. In this museum is where the Annabelle doll is kept. The Warrens had a specially made glass and wood case constructed, upon which they inscribed the Lord's Prayer and St. Michael's Prayer in the wood. For the rest of his life, Ed periodically said a prayer over the case, ensuring that the sinister spirit and the doll were forever trapped. The story of Annabelle has lived on past the deaths of the Warrens, Ed, who passed away in 2006, and Lorraine in 2019. The Warrens' story of the haunted doll inspired the Annabelle character in the Conjuring universe, a film series that includes Annabelle, Annabelle Creation, and Annabelle Comes Home. The filmmakers chose not to use the likeness of Raggedy Ann to avoid trademark issues and to make the doll appear more terrifying for a horror movie. Instead, they created a, quote, terrifying porcelain doll that is disfigured and immediately menacing. Annabelle first appears in James Wan's The Conjuring and makes brief appearances in The Conjuring 2, The Curse of La Llorona, and The Conjuring: The Devil Made Me Do It. The doll also appears in DC Extended Universe films like Aquaman and Shazam, as well as in Shazam: Fury of the Gods. According to a 1997 interview with the Connecticut Post, Steve Novella and Perry DeAngelis investigated the Warrens for the New England Skeptical Society. They found the couple to be pleasant people, but their claims of demons and ghosts to be, quote, at best, as tellers of meaningless ghost stories and at worst, dangerous frauds. They took the $13 tour and looked at all the evidence the Warrens had for spirits and ghosts. They watched the videos and looked at all the best evidence the Warrens had. They concluded, it's all blarney. They found common errors with flash photography and nothing evil in the artifacts the Warrens had collected. They have a ton of fish stories about evidence that got away. They're not doing good scientific investigation. They have a predetermined conclusion which they adhere to, literally and religiously. According to Novella, Lorraine Warren said that the problem with Perry and Steve is that they don't base anything on a god. Novella responded, it takes work to do solid, critical thinking, to actually employ your intellectual faculties and come to a conclusion that actually reflects reality. That's what scientists do every day. And that's what skeptics advocate. In an article for the Sydney Morning Herald that examined whether supernatural films are based on true events, that investigation was used as evidence to the contrary. As Novella is quoted, they claim to have scientific evidence which does not indeed prove the existence of ghosts, which sounds like a testable claim into which we can sink our investigative teeth. But what we found was a very nice couple, some genuinely sincere people, but absolutely no compelling evidence. Despite claims of the innocence of the couple and just that they were caught up in stories of religion and good shock, in 2017, Judith Penny claimed that she had a 40-year sexual relationship with Ed starting when she was 15. According to Penny, when she became pregnant, Lorraine persuaded her to have an abortion because the birth of a child would become a public scandal and could ruin the Warrens' business. Penny also claimed to have witnessed the couple engaged in physical abuse. Now, dear viewer, I implore you to believe what you want to believe in. Personally, I do believe in the paranormal and that some who investigated are genuine. I am simply a teenager on the internet with an infatuation on both Raggedy Ann and Andy, as well as horror. But what I do want to reiterate to you now is that the Warrens were not proving anything. What they were doing was pushing Christian belief with fear-mongering. The Warrens were Roman Catholic, and Lorraine Warren said that she believed a lack of religion was what often opened the door for malevolent forces to enter a home or life. When there is no religion, it is absolutely terrifying, she told the Irish Independent in 2013. That is your protection. God is your protection. Gruwell wrote his first Raggedy Ann book, Raggedy Ann Stories, in 1918, and publisher P.F. Volland arranged to sell Raggedy Ann dolls along with the books, and the tie-in between Gruwell's Raggedy Ann stories and the dolls proved a marketing hit. During his time writing the stories, Johnny Gruwell averaged one Raggedy Ann and Andy book per year, and children and families all around the world were entertained and charmed by Ann and her little brother Andy, who was introduced in the story starting in 1920. Countless amounts and types of merchandise were created of the dolls, including but not limited to figurines, clothes, music boxes, dishes, decor, and of course, classic rag dolls. The dolls have had many journeys through other media as well, most notably the beloved 1977 film Raggedy Ann and Andy, A Musical Adventure, which gained a resurgence in the past year on social media and has developed a small, loving fan base. Other TV and film about the dolls include Raggedy Ann and Andy, Suddenly It's Spring, The Enchanted Square, Raggedy Ann and Andy and the Great Santa Claus Caper, Raggedy Ann and Andy and the Pumpkin Who Couldn't Smile, The Adventures of Raggedy Ann and Andy, and On Stage with the musicals Raggedy Ann and Andy and Raggedy Ann. As loved as this red-headed duo was through the 20th century and into the 21st, with the rise of the internet, that has almost but all vanished. When searching the internet and specifically social media, there's an overwhelming amount of people who are terrified of Raggedy Ann because they know her as Annabelle. Any article, video, or online post about the Raggedy siblings is drowned out by comments of people claiming that all of the dolls are haunted, that Raggedy Ann is evil, and showed that the majority of younger people who did not grow up with the dolls don't know who Raggedy Ann is, but only know her as the one-off Annabelle. It could even be said that this Annabelle story, shared by countless people on the internet, has even increased the number of people with pediophobia, which is an intense fear of dolls. But why is any of this important at all? I love Raggedy Ann and Andy. I love dolls. With this, I do adore horror media. But lovely viewer, I lament again, not to take a story with shaky proof and ruin a legacy. A legacy created by a grieving man, a legacy that memorializes a tragedy, a legacy meant to bring nothing but joy to children and adults alike. Raggedy Ann and Andy are still beloved by some, but the fact that they are feared by most leaves me crestfallen. Go to a local thrift store, take a Raggedy doll home, appreciate the art of Johnny Gruelle, and let all of the deceased involved rest in peace.
Well, you can push me, shove me, turn me around, but I'm no girl's toy. You can tie me, toss me upside or down, but I'm no girl's toy. I sing my own sweet melody, I go my own sweet way. I won't beg round tomorrow for the kind of affection that was free today. Oh, you can squeeze me, tease me, say I'm your own, but I'm no girl's toy. You can charm me, chase me, follow me home, I won't be coy. You may not like it much, but I'm my own best boy, and not some sugar and spicy, lacy and nicey. Sissy, you're gonna enjoy now.